Good morning. Let your culture of safety. Line team, welcome aboard. Here we got January 2026. Mr. David McPeak, he's going to kick off the #1 Linemen Safety National Webinar of the year. It's going to be 086, and can you believe that? Almost 100 already. And he's going to be talking about SIF prevention, serious injury and fatality prevention. Very excited about him coming back here, just going over when the last time he was here, and man, I think it was February 2024. He hasn't been here since then. And he talked about the Frontline Leadership, the hurdle, got his book right here. And then the art of safety, he talked about that in 2023. Man, that's been a long time. The art of safety, but I want to talk a little bit real quick here on his book. This is the core of this whole book that he wrote here. Frontline Safety is competence, commitment, caring, courage, credibility, the C5 safety leadership. That's the core of this book, and I highly recommend you all get this book. There's a few books that I recommend as far as a must-have, and his book right here is a must-have. And I like how he puts caring in the middle of the whole thing, because if you don't care, no one else is going to care. So, David, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you, brother.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, been doing good, huh?
Fantastic.
Yeah, right on.
Hope you are.
Yeah. So give us a little background, David. You coming into the industry years and years ago.
So yeah,
when you were young,
right? A long time ago. I've been in the industry for 25, 30 years now. Started with an electrical contractor, actually in their fleet department. Ended up, like a lot of people do, getting kind of appointed to safety, but really quickly figured out that that was where my true passion lied. And in the training aspect of it, now in this role at the Incident Prevention Institute, that's what I get to focus on. So love what I do, love the industry. It's definitely a hazardous industry, but it doesn't have to be dangerous unless we make it that way, especially when we're talking about what we're going to talk about today, serious injuries and fatalities. So yeah.
So talk a little bit about your magazine that you all offer, the Incident Prevention Magazine. It's a great magazine, and I know it's free, and everybody should actually be enrolled in that and be subscribed to that, like yesterday. Tell us a little bit about that magazine.
Incident Prevention Magazine. Love the magazine. It's published every other month almost. I think this year there's 5 editions of it, but it's from articles on frontline leadership to technical things, grounding, bonding. There's a great Q&A session in there. A lot of the articles actually have some free webinars associated with them too. And the magazine's free. You can get it electronically or on paper, printed edition. So highly encourage everybody, at least go to the website, incident-prevention.com. Check it out, subscribe to it. You'll find a lot of good resources in there for yourself, but also some tailgate topics and great things for discussion as well. Love that magazine. Great resource.
And then you're a certified utility safety professional. As far as the certifications, give us a little bit of background in how to get all
so
that.
UBM, our company, Utility Business Media, manages that, or helps manage, I guess, that certification for the USOLE and Utility Safety and Ops Leadership Network. The Certified Utility Safety Professional is the certification for anybody in the utility industry. And I do think that both preparing for it, having it, earning those maintenance points associated with it, great personal and professional development opportunity, good for your credibility, your job growth and whatnot. Most importantly though, for safety, right? The better you get as a safety professional, the better you are able to serve those that you care about. That's to your point, everything should revolve around how much you care, C5 leadership.
So also you all offer some online training and online topics that folks can get on board and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the IP Institute, Incident Prevention Institute, and we have online and in-person classes. Most of those center around leadership, human and organizational performance, and then incident prevention we call safety, not technical aspects like grounding and bonding, but more how to do effective job briefings, how to use some of the tools we're going to talk about today. So a lot of the soft skills, and there's some technical things in there. We get some Danny Raines is coming here Wednesday. Some folks like that, the Jim Vones of the world that do some cover up in some of the technical topics as well. So it's just like our mission at UBM is to provide education, information, networking opportunities to anybody that works in the utility industry. So from the magazine, which is free, to our monthly forums, which are free, to the education we offer, really a lot of good resources there. So be sure and check them out.
Yeah. And then twice a year, incident prevention. You all put on a great conference, safety conference for utility professionals. This coming up, what, late April or no, early May?
Early May.
Yeah,
early May.
in Orlando.
In Orlando, great place to be. Right on the doorsteps of Universal at the DoubleTree, matter of fact.
Oh, nice.
So if you're a theme park kind of person, it's not a bad place to be at all.
So those conferences, twice a year, highly recommend. CEOs, some apprentices once in a while, send some of your apprentices out there, your linemen, your superintendents. These conferences are really good. It's not just for safety folks, these conferences at all. So get involved with incident prevention and what they do. They offer all kinds of resources like David is saying here today. And get educated, get better, be better, all right? And thank you very much for incident prevention, your all support for electric culture of safety, David. You guys are most awesome, and appreciate you, brother.
I appreciate you. I love what you're doing with the electric culture of safety, and great way just to get the information out.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate you having me here today. So the topic we're going to talk about, SIF Prevention Simplified, Serious Injuries and Fatalities. And I want to start with a little bit of background and get into some kind of general thoughts about safety, and then because this is such an important topic, right? We don't want people to get hurt, but absolutely, we do never want anybody to have a life-altering or a life-ending event at work. And the cool thing too is we talk about these tools and the things you do to prevent SIFs, whether it's on the weekends or whether you're driving or whatever it is you do. We're going to focus on work, obviously. It will protect people. And there is a very simple, great process for that we're going to talk about. So when we think about tools and we think about skills and incident prevention, SIF prevention really takes that to the next level. So I'll start with just a couple of quick questions just to get us thinking about this topic. And I think one of these questions is going to be really hard, one of them really easy. First question I want you to think about, and this is an interesting question. Would you rather fight 100 chickens for an hour, or Mike Tyson, and when I say Mike Tyson, I mean prime Mike Tyson, for 15 seconds? Let everybody think about that for a minute. Most folks take the chicken. Every now and then you get a few folks that would take Mike Tyson. It's kind of a hard question, right? And this is a really important question. The next question is, would you rather prevent SIFs, or would you rather investigate and respond to them? Because the thing about it is, anytime we talk about safety, you are going to do one of those two things. We're either going to prevent injuries and incidents, or we're going to respond to them and investigate them. And the number one thing I always try to have people think about is, we're always really good at safety after the fact. Somebody's been hurt, heaven forbid we have a SIF, serious injuries and fatalities. We get really good at safety for 2 or 3 months at least. I really want us to think about, how can we get good at safety right here, right now, and prevent them so we don't have to respond to them? That's the easy question, okay? And so the point about SIFs, and the thing that excites me about the industry, and we've talked about a lot of the things we do at the Incident Prevention Institute, ECOS, there's a lot of great resources out there, and these things are working. If you look at this chart, and I know these numbers are a couple of years behind, but it holds true, is the things that we've done to prevent injuries, general safety, are working and working well. You can see from that top graph, we have done a great job of reducing the number of injuries we've had. Unfortunately, if you look at SIFs, and this is just fatalities on the bottom of the chart there, is they've flatlined, if not gone up just a little bit. We haven't improved at those. Now, there's a couple of things about that. Just from a statistical standpoint, they're so rare, which is a good thing, but the numbers don't lie, and this chart is true. Maybe some of the things that we're doing to reduce some of those quote-unquote OSHA recordable injuries aren't effective at preventing SIFs. So what is the steps or the things that we need to add to when we think about SIF prevention, so we can make the bottom line look a lot like the top line and start getting those numbers down? Because I truly do believe when we're thinking about SIFs, the number has to be 0. The reality of it, when you think about safety, and it sounds like a great goal, and we'll talk about goals here in just a second, that nobody ever gets hurt again. The reality is that's not going to happen. Somebody's going to get hurt, right? Doing work involves exposure to hazards, therefore risk. And it'd be nice if we could say 0 injuries are possible. But we can 100% say 0 SIFs are possible. And that's what we're here today to talk about and what that looks like. So the first thing I want to mention, and as Brent said, it's January right now. This is the time of year when a lot of people make New Year's resolutions and set goals. And I've been studying up on goal setting and resolution and reading a couple of things about resolutions, whether they work, how long people stick with them and whatnot. And if you think about one of the biggest problems with resolutions that people make is their goals aren't very smart. And when I say smart, I mean specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. And probably one of the more common New Year's resolutions that you hear people make is, I want to lose weight. I want to get in shape. And that's good. I mean, that's kind of a vision and it's a goal, but there's no plan that gets there. If we make it specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely, we might say, I'm going to go to the gym and exercise at least 30 minutes, 3 times a week. That's specific. That's something we can measure. That's something we can stick to. If we do that well and combine it with some other healthy habits about what we eat and whatnot, we can accomplish that goal. But there's not a lot we can do with just, I want to lose weight. There's not a lot we can do with just, I want to get better at safety. There's not a lot you can do to say, I want to prevent SIFs. What you can do is make a plan and say, here's the tools, here's how I'm going to do it, and that's what we want to talk about today, is how we set, because again, it's not a very achievable goal just to say 0 injuries and nobody ever gets hurt, nothing ever happens again. For you and your team, while you're performing work, if we use tools and start planning 2-minute drills, we can say for the next 15 minutes while we're doing this task, we're not going to have a SIF. Now there's a goal we can work with, and there is a goal we can make a plan for. And so what does that plan look like? That's what we're here to talk about. Before we get into that part of SIF prevention, I do want to mention a couple of things about safety that I think we need to understand before we can really apply the SIF prevention techniques in terms of how we tend to settle. We settle for compliance, we settle for comfort, we settle for convenience, and we settle for what we're going to define as below the line protection, which is good. But when we're talking about SIFs, we've got to be great. We can't settle for good. Big topic is settling also for job generalizations instead of having very task-specific discussions. And I'll just throw out this thought now and we'll elaborate it more in a minute, but there is no way in a 10-minute or 15-minute job briefing at the start of the day we can do all the safety planning we need to do for the entire day. And I do feel like in this industry we over-rely a little bit on that pre-job briefing. That needs to be more of a process with a pre-job briefing supplemented by 2-minute drills where we have a task-specific discussion, and couple those with post-job briefings so we can think about and learn from both what we did well and where there were opportunities for improvement. So, long way of saying, never ever over-rely on job briefings and just PPE, right? PPE is at the bottom of the hierarchy of controls for a reason. And never ever rely on somebody or something or someone else to protect you. And after we talk about that, then we'll talk very simply, SIF Prevention Simplified, a 1-sentence statement about what that looks like and how to do it. So, start with this. And it's football season right now. The playoffs have started. Super Bowl's next month. And I think there is a key concept that we can learn from football teams. There's a couple of things that they do and they do well. They scout their opponents really well. The thing I would throw out right now is, in terms of that, if a football team, even if they had a bad defense, went to scout one of their opponents, and let's say they're playing my team, and they figure out, hey, David's team only has one play in their playbook and they run it every single time. And they make a plan to stop that one play. And we start a game and I literally run that same play every time, they're probably going to be pretty darn successful because in their scouting they have predicted exactly how their opponent's going to behave. The great thing about that for us, hazards, things that hurt people, they run one play and they run it every single time. You think about any hazard, a ladder. Gravity is the hazard associated with that. It runs one play, it runs it every single time. Any tool, you think about from a knife to a hydraulic crimper or something like that. They behave, a rotating backhoe. It runs one play, it runs it every single time. Electricity, if you know a little something about Ohm's law, it runs the same play, it runs it every single time. We can get that good at safety if we start making task-specific discussions, which is what I want to talk about, because the thing that I feel like we do a pretty good job of is that scouting and making a game plan and having that pre-job briefing. The magic for football teams happens, though, before every single play they huddle up. And in that huddle, all they talk about is, here's what we're going to do for the next 4 seconds of our life. And there's 11 people in this huddle, and I want to make sure all 11 people understand what play this team is running and each person's role in that play. And I think therein lies our greatest opportunity in safety, is stop just relying on that job briefing in the morning. Task-specific discussions. Every time there's short delays or minor changes, every time we're switching from one location, one pole, one structure, one house, depending on whatever kind of work you're doing, to another. Stop and think about, what are we going to do for the next 15 minutes of our life? What play are we going to run, and what is everybody's role in that play? And then we can make a plan for what David's going to do. We can make a plan for what Brent's going to do. However many people there are on their team, it's a task-specific discussion. That's where the magic happens. And then the other thing we could learn from football teams that I think is really, really important, and we get this half right? They watch game film afterwards. And when they're watching that game film, they think about two things, and we're really good at the first question. What did we screw up that we need to fix? And I think we're already doing a pretty good job of that. But from a safety and from a culture, and hear me say that, we're talking about safety today and not that much about culture. You want to radically change the culture in a group and a team and ultimately the organization. Start asking this too. When football teams watch game film, they also think, hey, we scored. Or there's the other team's best receiver. He or she didn't get a catch the whole game. What did we do to stop that? Or when we scored, what did we learn from successes? We need to investigate and analyze success as much, if not more, than we do failure. We're already really good post-incident at the failure part of it. What do we screw up that we need to fix? But you succeed a whole lot more than you fail. Think about safety. It's actually very rare, and in terms of SIF, extremely rare, which is good, that we fail. So what can we learn from successes? But for the purpose of today, let's really focus on that concept of that 2-minute drill, which equates to a football team huddling up and having a very task-specific discussion. Here's what play we're running, and here's each person's role in that play, and make a plan for each one of those people per the hierarchy of controls. So that's the first critical tool, is it has to be a task-specific discussion, not a job generalization. That's where the magic of safety can happen. And once we do that, back to a couple of challenges we've got to overcome, and I'll just have you think for a second. How often in your job briefings do we basically say, here's a hazard, here's what PPE we're going to put on, we're protected, let's go to work. And then somebody writes literally on the job briefing form, where are your PPE, and that's our plan. It's not a bad plan, but PPE is at the bottom of the hierarchy of controls. And I'll briefly challenge you right now. Think about a soccer team. And if I was coaching a soccer team and I just sent a goalie out and I told that goalie, say, hey goalie, do not let the other team score. And that was the whole entirety of my plan. We don't play offense, we don't do anything, we just take what should be our last line of defense and we center our game plan around that goalie being really good. Now, it actually kind of presents a problem because the PPE, and I'm here at bierermeters today, a lot of the tools that we have in this industry, they're really good and they work really well and they provide a whole lot of protection, right? And so what if I sent that goalie out there and he or she did their job really well and the other team didn't score? I start to think maybe as a soccer coach, hey, that's a good plan. I need more of that. And I lose a lot of opportunities because I'm settling for that last line of defense and it works really well. I don't think about my best option when in a soccer game would actually be keep the ball the whole game and the other team never takes a shot towards my goal. In that situation, if I've eliminated the hazard, so to speak, I don't even need the goal. They stand back there and they watch a really good game. I still have one. And I want them back there, and I want them to be really, really good at what they do, but they are truly my last line of defense. Let that be your model for safety. If your safety plan centers around PPE, that should be a cue. That should really trigger a thought in your mind that, hey, we've got a good plan right now. How can we make this plan better? Because just because you're in compliance doesn't mean you're out of danger. Just because you're wearing PPE doesn't mean you can get hurt. Things like a cut-resistant glove, right? They work, and they work really well. And what happens is I put that on and I start over relying on it, and I feel like my hands are invincible. I probably won't cut my hand, but it will be turned into at some point in time a fracture or an amputation or something like that, because my work methods change the more I rely on those PPE, and I'm not actually doing what I need to do to protect myself from the hazard. So remember that concept. Never let the other team shoot, but have a goalie just in case when we're making our safety plans. And now let's kind of apply those principles of task-specific discussions rather than job generalizations. Not below the line equaling compliance, following the rules and PPE, but how do we get above the line? And talk about SIFs. And the first thing I want to think about in terms of SIFs, you've probably seen Heinrich's injury pyramid before. And I just like to say, whatever you think about Heinrich's injury pyramid, there's definitely something we can learn from it. So 641 potential outcomes that you see on the screen right now. The good news about safety, even if we do something wrong, our most likely outcome is to hit the bottom of the pyramid, nothing really bad happens. Kind of a problem with that is texting and driving, right? We know what's wrong, you do it 641 times, the large majority of the time you get away with it, which then starts to mean, hey, this is okay, I can now text and drive. And the problem with that is we establish that new work method, and sooner or later we hit the top of the pyramid and realize, hey, that wasn't a good plan to start with. So safety can be kind of a self-defeating proposition in the sense the most likely outcome of unsafe acts or the errors we make is nothing bad happens. And we need to realize in terms, and I want you to think about if you were driving right now, okay? Not necessarily texting and driving like I was saying, but this is a really important concept. If I'm traveling at 5 miles an hour and I crash into something 641 times, this pyramid makes sense. It makes a whole lot of sense. 630 times, according to this pyramid, either nothing bad's going to happen to me physically at all at a 5 mile an hour collision, or I might have a very minor injury. Okay? What if then the vehicle is traveling 30 miles an hour? What does the pyramid start to look like then? The bottom of it's starting to disappear now. I'm most likely probably to have at least a minor injury. Now I've got a pretty good chance of having a serious injury, if not a fatality. And then think about as we increase the hazard the amount of energy associated with a hazard, i.e. our risk, our exposure. What if the vehicle's traveling 100 miles an hour? Now at this point in time, it's probably a one-step pyramid. It's probably going to be a fatality, for sure, right? The bottom part of the pyramid is starting to go on. So the principle associated with SIF prevention, the plan has to be based on how much energy there is. And there is a certain amount of energy at which SIF prevention has to kick in. Think about, I mentioned ladders earlier, right? If I'm standing on a 2-foot step stool and I fall off of it 641 times, the pyramid probably holds true. What if it's a 10-foot tall ladder? Or what if it's a 40-foot tall ladder? There comes a certain amount of energy associated with the hazard where our most likely outcome is the top of the pyramid. That's what we're going to define as high energy, and that's what we're going to say. If there's high energy, i.e. my most likely outcome is the top of this pyramid, I have to have direct controls in place, and we'll talk about what that is. So another way of thinking about that, and I really kind of like this image because we talk too much about pyramids and triangles and all that thing in terms of safety. Let's say we were throwing darts, okay? And let's say that I threw 641 darts towards that dartboard. And let's say that I back up and I'm standing 40, 50 feet away from the dartboard. What's going to happen? 600 of those darts probably won't even hit the board, right? If you're like me, I've got the big foam backboard back behind the thing because I don't even hit the dartboard when I throw them. But if I throw enough darts, sooner or later, one of them's going to hit the bullseye. I hope that makes sense. Now, what if I went up and I stood like close to the dartboard? I don't have to throw 641 darts. I about guarantee I'm going to hit the bullseye. And my point in saying that, and think about the triangle we just looked at, most of the time, we're going to hit the outer ring of the bullseye. sometime we might have that little minor injury. If we throw enough darts, sooner or later we will hit the middle of that bullseye, and it'll either be a serious injury or a fatality. So what SIF prevention essentially boils down to on this dartboard, put some kind of cover over the middle of the dartboard where even if a dart's starting to hit it, it doesn't hit the board, SIFs don't happen. Because here's the thing, every dart you throw is either an error, an unsafe act, or an exposure to an unsafe condition. I'll repeat that. Every dart, 641 of them in this case, is an error, an unsafe act, or an exposure to an unsafe condition. So if we go back and we think about the pyramid that we talked about, there's really two goals that we're talking about here, which is we should stay off the pyramid as much as possible, right? Error reduction techniques, and then our focus today, how do you protect yourself when you're on the pyramid, and especially if we determine our most likely outcome is the top of the injury pyramid, how do we absolutely make sure that we don't go there? So briefly, I'll mention, how do you stay off the pyramid, reduce errors? And I say briefly because no matter how good you are, and this is another thing about your safety plan, if it relies on people to get it right, what do we know about people? We know a lot of good things about people, but from human and organizational performance, we also know Principle 1 says people are fallible, even the best make mistakes. If your plan relies 100% on people to get it right, sooner or later that plan will fail, no matter how good those people are and no matter how hard they try. And so error reduction, I'm not going to go through all these. I've got a lot of HOP tools and whatnot up there. The one that I always like to talk about, if you go to the doctor, right? A couple of things they do. Number one, they drive you crazy. What's your birthday? What's your birthday? What's your birthday? Why do they ask you that so many times? It's because they want to make sure that they treat the right patient, that you're you. And they figured that out because unfortunately there were some times when that didn't happen and they had the wrong patient. So there's a very simple HOP example of a human and organizational performance tool that they use to prevent errors. The one I want to think about for a second is if I go to have surgery, right? A highly trained, highly skilled professional called a surgeon is going to come in with a magical tool called a Sharpie and write their initials on my shoulder. If they're going to operate on my left shoulder, let's just say. And then they take it a step farther and have another person come in and put their initials on it too. Why do they do that? Number one, birthday, they want to make sure that I'm me. Number two, if they're going to operate on my left shoulder, they want to make sure they get that right. My point in saying that is, how hard is it to use a Sharpie? How hard is it to train someone to use a Sharpie and write their initials? It's beyond an easy tool. But I like to think about the moment somebody stood in front of that highly skilled, highly trained group of surgeons, and let's just say somebody like me is standing in front of a group of like 50 surgeons and say, hey, I know you all are all really good at your job and you're really smart and you're really highly trained and good and all this kind of thing. But from now on, when you're going to do a surgery, you're going to have to use a Sharpie and you're going to have to write your initials on David's shoulder. What do you imagine the reaction in the room was? Do you think that they were all like, hey, David, that's a freaking brilliant idea. I love it. Or do you think there might have been more of a thought of, forget you and your Sharpie. I don't need your tool. I am so good at my job. All the safety tools are just like that. They're easy. There's nothing that's really, we don't need a lot of training on them. They're simple to use. The hard part is convincing ourselves, hey, I actually need this Sharpie. I need to use the tool. So those error reduction tools that are available to you, and you can learn a lot more about those on our website and in the magazine, HOP training, those kind of things. But again, the more difficult part is actually deciding, because the interesting thing, if you talk to most surgeons now, they don't really resent the Sharpie anymore. They kind of like it because it keeps them from getting sued for malpractice and it helps them do their job right. And while they may not necessarily love the tool, they respect and appreciate and value it enough that they always use it. And because they do that, guess what else happens? They don't make errors, especially at the part they have to get right. And that's the model for safety when you think about those tools. SIF prevention, there's the one sentence statement: direct controls for high energy exposures that are verified before you proceed to a critical step. That's not it, and that's not hard. And I do want to go through and define what's a direct control, what's high energy, we've kind of already talked about that. What does verification look like, and then what actually is a critical step? Because most people I talk to, if you say, what's this critical step associated with your work? And there is some logic in saying in the industry and the kind of work that you do, everything's hazardous and everything sort of is a critical step. But for the task and the process you're doing, there is one critical step. And if you have direct controls in place for all the high energy that you've verified before you proceed to that critical step, SIF prevention is literally 100% possible. You cannot have a SIF. So just a brief explanation of all that, right? Above the line protection with direct controls. What that means is we have eliminated the hazard or the risk associated with it. If there's no energy or you're not exposed to the energy, energy can't hurt you, right? So that's always our preferred. Back to the soccer team. If the other team never takes a shot towards your goal, that's a really, really good plan. It's always going to work 100% of the time. Or if we have reduced the energy below the high energy threshold, SIFs also aren't possible, okay? Or they're highly, highly, highly unlikely, okay? Or safety devices that qualify as direct controls if we're above the high energy threshold, okay? High energy means our most likely, the way I like to explain it, your most likely outcome is the top of the pyramid. There is a scientific definition, and there are, for any hazard, a number associated with it. It's whatever equals 1,500 foot-pounds or 1,500 joules, and we're not going to get into all the science of it, but I will show you some examples of what qualifies as high energy when SIF prevention has to kick in. Verified. Verified is really, really important. And I just like, if I'm typing up a document, I can proofread my own work. When I do that, it's very likely I might miss some of my errors. But if I hand it to a third party, let's just say Brent for verification, I type the document up, I proofread it myself, it looks great to me, I read it like I wanted it to read. Brent looks at it and he's like, David, what the heck are you doing here? And he's going to see a lot of errors that I might miss myself. So verification means somebody not involved in the plan and the work, and the establishment of whatever your protective system is verifies that it's correct for you. And that is a really, really critical concept. If you're working by yourself, you can still use verification techniques. You just really have to be a little extra focused. And that has to happen before you proceed to a critical step, which is defined as the point of no return or the step in a process which can't be reversed. For safety purposes, that means the second somebody's going to be exposed to enough energy, it could seriously alter or end their life. Before that exposure, we verify that our plan is indeed above the line with direct controls. So, direct controls, before I get into direct controls, just a quick example. And these are fun exercises. I always say, like, just go ask people, how do you prevent a backing accident? And if you go ask 100 of your drivers that tomorrow, the two most common answers you're going to get are goal, get out and look, 360-degree circle of safety, or use a spotter. I almost guarantee that's true. And you'll get a whole lot of answers that are below the line, so to speak. And hear me say, when we talk about safety and we say below the line, most of the time when somebody says below the line, it's bad and above the line is good. Not true here. Below the line is good, above the line is great. Below the line means we're compliant, safe, following the rules, so to speak. Above the line means we can't actually get hurt. So if we wanted to think about how do you prevent a backing accident, the answer is anything that's above the line, right? I'm not saying somebody, but if your vehicle, for instance, is equipped with a collision avoidance system, that would qualify as a direct control. You're not going to back into anything as long as it's installed, verified, and used correctly, okay? It doesn't mean somebody won't back into you, but it will stop you from backing into other things. Preferably, we don't back up at all, okay? So in thinking about above the line, anything that's an administrative control warning device, PPE, or a combination of all that, I'm following all the rules and I'm wearing my PPE. And I have some kind of warning device, right? Think about a warning device. The fire alarm in the building goes off. How much protection does that actually provide you? None. You got to do something with it. It only warns you that a hazard is present. PPE, same way. It provides a lot of protection, but it doesn't necessarily mean you can't get hurt. Rules and procedures are all designed to provide a minimum level of protection, which is why it's important when we think about SIFs, how do we get above the line? With either safety devices that qualify as direct controls and or we reduce the hazard where there's not enough energy that qualifies as a high energy exposure. So, common example, I'm working on the side of the road, work area protection kind of thing. Most people would tell you if I've got all my cones out and they're spaced correctly and all the signage up and whatnot, it's nothing but a warning device. And I always kind of like to say, like, we're thinking about the hazard is an 18-wheeler. Really think about this. And let's just say it's an 18-wheeler traveling 30 miles an hour. And our plan is a little fancier version of this. It's a 3-foot tall piece of rubber that's a little nicer than that and whatnot. That tractor trailer hits that cone, what's it going to hit next and what's going to happen to you? We're really good at the below the line part. Above the line, engineered controls and safety devices would tell us a crash truck at the end of the work zone. That same tractor trailer hits the crash truck, bad day for it, good day for you. SIFs aren't possible. So there's kind of the question, just a simple question I ask is, with this plan, could somebody experience a SIF? If the answer to that is yes, your plan is below the line. If the answer to that is no, your plan's above the line. Ideally in the work zone, we shut the road down and there's no traffic. If there's no energy, energy can't hurt you. But at a minimum, if there is traffic, we need to have that permanent barrier, whatever it looks like, that will protect us from that. And we can't just settle for high energy exposures of saying, I'm following the rules and per the MUTCD or whatever the rule governing our work is. It can't just be a compliant plan with a bunch of safety warning devices. It has to be safety device or more. And I think that's a good example. So specific to SIFs then, and a lot of this is based, by the way, on some work from Matthew Hollowell and other great folks at the Construction Research Safety Alliance at the University of Colorado. If you want to learn more about it, and the EEI has done a lot of work with them too, and we're going to look at some of that in a minute. But credit where credit's due. Think about the energy wheel, a lot of the SIF and high energy definitions. Matthew Hollowell, but the way they define it is 3 conditions. A direct control has to be specifically targeted at a specific hazard. That means if your plan involves something like just a work glove or a leather work glove, it's targeted at a lot of different hazards. A hard hat, it's generic PPE, it will never ever qualify. In our industry, a rubber glove by itself would meet that definition of a direct control. It is specifically targeted at a specific hazard, and if I have the right class glove on for the voltage I'm working, it will work. But if you continue, it effectively mitigates the hazard when it's installed, verified, and used correctly. If I'm just wearing a rubber glove, something else could still hit an energized power line or part of it, and I could still experience a SIF. So by itself, a rubber glove, if you combine it with insulation and isolation techniques, cover up, those sort of things, I can establish a protective system that guarantees I can't experience a SIF. So it has to effectively mitigate the hazard when it's installed, verified, that word we keep saying, and used correctly, even if there is unintentional human error during the work not related to the installation of the control. So unintentional human error. I've got that crash truck we were talking about earlier installed, verified, and used correctly. Unintentional human error, somebody's driving down the road and for whatever reason they're texting, driving, not paying attention. It could even be truly unintentional. Maybe they have a medical emergency or whatever, and they swerve into your work zone. That crash truck is going to work no matter what if it's installed, verified, and used correctly. It's a great example of SIFs, and I mentioned the question there. Basically, that's it that you see on the bottom of your screen now. With this protection, is a SIF possible? If the answer to that is yes, you're below the line, we need to stop, huddle, that 2-minute drill we mentioned earlier, right? If no, you can't experience a SIF. And it's usually not that hard. We just have to, like we said with the surgeon and that Sharpie, we have to take the time because you, just like that surgeon, are a highly trained, highly skilled person doing a fairly difficult and complex job. That's why the tools are so important if we use them. High energy exposures, again, I like to just very simply say, if our most likely outcome is the top of the pyramid and we could experience a serious injury or fatality, it's high energy. That being said, there's scientific research, 500 foot-pounds, 1,500 joules, if it's greater than that. What it equates to is some of those numbers you see on the scene for screen. If it's electricity, if it's greater than 50 volts, that's the threshold where it could kill you. It doesn't mean 49 volts can't kill you. It just means at 50 volts or more, your most likely outcome is the top of the pyramid. Any hazard, gravity hazard, if you're more than 4 feet off the ground and you fall, that's where you're most likely to experience a SIF. So if you're going to be more than 4 feet off the ground, direct controls, above the line protection, it has to kick in. If you don't see a number, a suspended load, right? Any suspended load could alter or end your life if it falls and hits you in the head. So if you don't see a number on the screen, that means it qualifies as high energy by itself. An explosion, obvious example, right? High energy exposure. In a trench, 5 feet. It's interesting, think about OSHA standards now. If you read 1926, 650, that's the threshold where protective systems are required. Why is that? 5 feet's the level at which your most likely outcome is a serious injury or a fatality. And if we have a direct control, called like a trench box or something like that, that's installed, verified, and used correctly, even if the trench caved in, nobody can experience a SIF. Again, it's not a hard concept, it's just understanding when we have high energy, we got to have direct controls that are verified before we proceed to a critical step. Verification, I think we've already talked about, but it really, preferably, and I know a lot of you probably work by yourselves, and it is possible to verify with rules and procedures and regulations and whatnot, but preferably a second person to confirm that your actions and conditions are correct. You can check while you're doing your work. Verification involves another person saying, okay, yes, this is indeed right, before we proceed to a critical step. When we think about a critical step, said earlier, it's the step in any process that can't be reversed and or the point of no return. In terms of safety, it's the moment somebody's going to be exposed to high energy in terms of SIF prevention. So think about sending an email, right? What is the critical step in an email? The answer to that is when I hit the send button. And what I mean by that is I can screw that email up as bad as I want, and as long as I have somebody check it and verify before I hit the send button is the point in time at which it better be right. I can't take it back, okay? Almost nobody ever gets the answer to this one right, but think about skydiving, right? What's the critical step in skydiving? The answer is it's not packing your parachute, it's not inspecting your chute, it's not, those things are important. The critical step in that process is when you jump out of the plane. And if you really think about that, the second before I jump out of the plane, we get safety right when we know we should. If I'm jumping out of a plane, there's a lot, people are going to check and verify that that chute is packed and is packed correctly and it's going to work and it's got safeguards built in and all those sort of things. But think about, I don't even need a parachute if I never jump out of the plane. But before I jump out of the plane, I dang well have better had checked myself and had somebody else verify all the safety stuff and work methods were correct. And if we do that, we'll be successful. If we skip any of that, so start challenging yourself to think about critical steps and challenge yourself to have those huddles we were talking about, both to plan your work and that moment before somebody's exposed to high energy to say, with this plan, could somebody experience a SIF? And that essentially, back to our one sentence statement, that's all SIF prevention is. Direct controls for high energy exposures that are verified before we proceed to a critical step. So all you have to do is understand what is a direct control. We talked about the definition of that. What's high energy? We talked about the threshold there and those numbers and what does it mean to verify? And then what's the critical step in the process? And it's that simple. So here's kind of a chart that looks complicated, but I love this chart because it's actually not. The key is it starts with that huddle, that task-specific discussion. We define the task, not the job. Okay? Think about the difference between me saying, hey, we're going to work around an excavation today, versus my plan for the task that I'm going to do for the next 5 minutes, which is measure how deep that excavation is. If I stick to that generic sort of, how do you prevent a backing incident, I'm always going to be below the line and I'll have spotters and those sort of things. If I think, how can my next task is to move my vehicle from that parking lot over to wherever it is I'm going, I can probably figure out a way how not to back up. And in terms of the excavation example, if my task is to measure how deep it is, I can make a plan where I don't have to get in the excavation and I can eliminate the hazard. That's where the magic happens, it's in that task-specific discussion. Then you identify the hazard as the source of energy, risk, how much energy there is, or there could be associated with that hazard, and you create an exposure statement. You start with, can I eliminate the hazard? If not, can I eliminate the risk? And after those two questions, the most important and the step that we probably skip the most, reduce energy and exposure as much as possible. And at that point, if you can reduce it below the high energy threshold, you're fine to be below the line. But if you can't and you exceed the high energy threshold, you have to have direct controls that are verified before you proceed to a critical step. And if you do that, all the combination of the hierarchy of controls, SIFs aren't possible. And then the key in that is, once we make that plan, anytime there's a change in our task, the hazard, or the risk, we stop and have that huddle again, that 2-minute drill that we were talking about. It works, and it works well. So SIF prevention, I'll say this sentence one more time, above the line protection with direct controls for any high energy that is verified before you proceed to a critical step. SIF prevention requires to, just like that surgeon, value the tools. I always tell people, if nothing else, just pick 1 or 2 tools and try them consistently for 2 or 3 days. And if you find that they're helping you stay off the pyramid and protect yourself when you're on it, reduce errors, manage controls, keep using them. If they're a complete and total waste of your time, never use them again. I say that because I trust the tools enough to know that if you try them, they will work for you. The key is to have that moment where we think, I actually need to use these tools, and value them. Challenge any below the line work planning and task execution, and then have those task specific huddles that supplement your job generalizations from your pre-job briefings, and combine that with that post-job briefing too. But for SIF prevention, I always like to say, and I'll close with this thought, practice it in low-risk environments. Get good at these tools when they can't alter or end somebody's life, so they'll be available when you really need them. If you don't do that when you really need them, they won't be available to you. And there's a great quote there at the bottom of your screen from Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great. He's talking about schools, I think, but it relates to safety. Good is the enemy of great. And that's the reason we have so little that becomes great. I think to a certain extent, and I want to be careful that you don't interpret what I'm saying wrong, compliance is the enemy of safety. Because compliant does mean we're following the rules and wearing our PPE and those sort of things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're protected. And because we settle for PPE, because we settle for following the rules and administrative controls and warning devices and that sort of thing, that limits our ability to be great. And when we're talking about SIFs, you have to be great. You can't settle for good. So practice these tools in low risk, low hazard environments. Some of the things that we talked about before we kick this off, and there's some QR codes where you can scan them. I can't think of a better way, just real quick. The monthly forum that we do, it's free. And it is literally just, we provide a panel of subject matter experts in a webinar kind of format. And anybody that works in the utility can log in and ask those subject matter experts any question they want to. And if we don't have the answer, we'll find the answer for you. There's Incident Prevention Magazine, which is also free. A link to some of the books, and I wanted to include as well my contact information. Reach out if you've got questions about this. But SIF prevention, direct controls, high energy exposure that are verified before you proceed to a critical step. Practice that, value that, teach it to your team and use it. Make sure you're above the line, and SIF prevention is entirely possible. Practice the tools in low risk, low hazard environments so they'll be available when you really need them. Thank you for your time and attention, and I want to thank Brent again for the opportunity, everything that he and bierermeters are doing with ECOS, all the folks involved with ECOS. There's a fantastic lineup of presenters. So just thank you for your time and attention, and Brent, thank you for having me today.